morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever and wherever you are. This is Marlena's Chapter Break. Today we will be ranking all 10 of Riley Sager's novels. Now, is anybody else out there just kind of done with summer? I feel like when I was younger, I really used to enjoy the heat and the sun. And as I've gotten older, I don't know if it's just my age or I don't know, maybe my preferences have changed, but the heat, I just cannot withstand it anymore. And living in the Northeast, our summers tend to be short, but they tend to be very hot and humid. Now I'm just like, can fall just please get here? And I am just like aching for spooky season to start and for the air to become crisp and the leaves to turn and fall. And we all know what comes after autumn. I get it, because autumn is very short, but I just, summer just needs to go. Like, I feel like it's outstayed its welcome. I'm just kind of done with it. Anyway, but today we are going to talk about somebody who is very good at writing spooky novels. So maybe this will be the catalyst to start my spooky season this year. I think I'm going to start early this year. I'm not going to wait till after Labor Day. I think it starts now. So we are ranking Riley Sager's books, all 10 of them. This does include his new release, The Unknown, which I read in about a day and a half. Maybe not even, maybe like a day and an hour. I do want to say, though, that Riley Sager is an automatic buy author for me. And I genuinely like all of his books. There isn't any one of his books that I despise or that I even remotely dislike, but there are books that I don't like as much as others. And I feel like a lot of people think that way when it comes to Riley Sager. He tends to be pretty polarizing. Some people love him, some people hate him, and then some people love some of his books but hate some of his books. Either way, for me, he's an automatic buy author. I have not met a book of his that I don't like in some way. But like I said, some of them I just like more than others. So we are going to start off this countdown at number 10, and that is With a Vengeance. I expected so much more from this book. I'm not going to lie. I did overall like it because I like his writing style. Riley Sager has a way to kind of like grip you and bring you in to the story, and you are just constantly turning the page and wanting to know more, wanting to get to the end of what is happening. So With a Vengeance did do that for me. However, this might be a controversial opinion too. This follows the same theme as And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, and I loved And Then There Were None. I love the original, right? And there have been some stories that are written with similar themes. So you're looking at books like Daisy Darker, One by One, The Guest List, all decent mid thrillers for me. And I think the reason why they are just decent mid thrillers is because I think that this theme is just kind of overplayed at this point. So you've got a certain number of people within a confined space and they keep dying off one by one, and you're trying to figure out who's killing because there's only so many suspects there can be, and so one of them has to be the killer. And I mean, it's great, when it's done once or twice, but then eventually it just kind of becomes old. And because I had read Daisy Darker, One by One, The Guest List, and others before I read this one, by the time I got to With a Vengeance, I'm like, okay, nah, like, let's move on from this theme, please. But overall, I did like the book. I did like it, mainly because I like his style of writing. There's a little suspension of belief like there is with any mystery thriller, let's be honest. But to me, this book, out of the 10 that he has written, is definitely my least favorite. And next at number 9, we have Middle of the Night. The way that I understand it, this is probably most people's least favorite Riley Sager book. And I guess I can understand why. This one is coming, I think, from a more like emotional grief, guilt type place, as opposed to just trying to solve the mystery. And there is a mystery here, but it just feels different than the rest of his books. So, in this book, you are following Ethan, whose best friend Billy has vanished when they were kids. They were camping out in the yard, and then all of a sudden, Billy is just gone, and the mystery was never solved. And when Ethan is an adult, he comes back to try to figure out what happened to Billy. And there's all of these mysterious things happening, and circumstances that lead Ethan to really dive in to figure out what happened to his friend Billy. The twist in this book, if you can call it a twist, really was quite underwhelming compared to other Riley Sager books. And it makes me wonder if maybe that's why this is so divisive among people who like and read his books. This was a lot more introspective too than his other books. The pacing was a little different. I think all around this book was just, it just doesn't fit into the catalog the way that you think it would. And maybe that's why people just don't respond to it the way that they respond to some of his other books, which is completely fine. I mean, when you've written 10 books, you can't, I mean, I guess you can expect all 10 of them to be amazing, but I feel like the larger your catalog gets, you're probably going to have some that, I don't want to say flop, because I don't think any of his books have flopped at all. It's just, you're going to have some that don't resonate with people, and that's fine. I think it's just part of the game, right? But overall, I did enjoy the book because I enjoy all of his books, really. And yes, it was a little bit different, so it didn't stick with me like some of the other books did. So overall, it's a good read. Now, if I had a dime for every time I watched a video of a person talking about how much they hated this book, I probably would be financially pretty well off. And this is the number 8 book for me. This is The House Across the Lake. So, this book is about an actress who recently lost her husband and she moves to a remote lake in Vermont, I think it is. And she's bored, so she picks up a set of binoculars and she sees something across the lake happening that makes her very suspicious. So we're talking, if you're an Alfred Hitchcock fan, we're talking Rear Window. This is basically a modernized Rear Window. I really enjoyed this book. I felt like the suspense was really good, but it has been a few years, probably more than a few years since I've read it. So I'm sure there's details that I'm missing, but I remember I enjoyed this book, including the twist. And I know that the twist was divisive for people. I know that there was people who did not like it at all, but if I remember correctly, I liked it. But yes, this is very Rear Window. I saw something I shouldn't see. So if you're looking for another modern interpretation, The Girl on the Train, type thing. But yeah, it's, I know people either love or hate this book. I think more people hate it than love it, but if I remember correctly, I like this book. And going more with the Rear Window theme, you have your voyeurism, you have your isolation. Can you trust the main character's point of view? So you may or may not be dealing with an unreliable narrator. If you haven't read it, I don't want to give anything away, but yeah, like I said, overall, I did like this book enough to rank it number 8 out of 10. So, and next we have another seemingly polarizing novel. I'm ranking it at number 7, and this is Survive the Night. The one thing I can say about this book is you have to suspend your disbelief pretty much through the entire book. But it doesn't take away from the fact that the way it's written, it's extremely suspenseful. It's very high stakes. I remember that I read this, I think it was during it was a little after New Year's. And I sat on the couch and I read this in one day. I could not put it down. In this book, you are following a college student, and there is a tragedy back home, and she needs to figure out how to get back home to deal with this tragedy. And as it turns out, there is a young man who is also going back home, and he apparently is her only way to get back there. So essentially, she gets in the car with a stranger, drives across, I don't know if I can't remember if it was across country, across state, whatever. She's in a car at night with this stranger, and it's got the vibes of, oh yeah, and there's also a serial killer on the loose. Okay, very convenient. But so there's a question of whether or not the boy that's taking her home is the serial killer, and it kind of goes back and forth. And then when you get to the reveal, it's like, okay, I guess I could see it. So, in my opinion, is this his greatest book? No, it's not. But I am ranking it where I am just off of vibes alone and how I felt when I read it. And that is that I was so excited when I was reading this to figure out what was happening. I was on the edge of my seat. I was just turning the pages saying, I need to know, I need to know, I need to know. I just remember loving the experience of reading this book. So that is why I am ranking it where I am ranking it. I know there's probably people out there that think that it should be lower, but I overall, like, I just like this book. I really, really did. So it is what it is. And next at number 6, we have Riley Sager's debut novel, and that is Final Girls. And this book is about exactly what it says, Final Girls. If I remember correctly, there's a group of 3 girls, and Quincy is the main character of this novel. And, her experience had happened years before, and she's built a somewhat normal life since this traumatic thing happened to her. And then Quincy, when she figures out that these final girls are dying, she sets out to figure out exactly what happened, not only on the night that she almost died, but like who is behind all of this and why it keeps happening. So this book is told in alternate timelines. It feels like it's very much inspired by like the 80s slasher film. So we're talking like Halloween, Friday the 13th. It's definitely got these type of vibes, and it can be, if I remember correctly, it's also a little bit like campy at times. I could be confusing this with a Grady Hendrix book, but I'm not sure. I read so many, but I remember what happened, and I remember who the perpetrator was. I don't remember like all of the tiny little details, I think, but I do remember that I like this book. So we're going to rank Final Girls at number 6. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got. And then following Final Girls, we have Riley's second book in his catalog that I am ranking at number 5, and that is Lock Every Door. This book of his has pretty decent reviews. If I remember correctly, a lot of people seem to really like this. It is a very interesting premise. I don't want to say that it's unique, but it's interesting. And it kind of makes you wonder, if you were put in the same situation as this main character, what would you do? And the answer to that after reading this novel is no. Just no. So in this book, you are following Jules, and she takes this opportunity, seemingly of a lifetime, where she gets paid to rent a room in this very mysterious building. I believe it's in New York City. And but the caveat is that she can't tell anybody that she lives there, and she basically has to live a life of isolation to house sit for whoever it was that hired her. The rules are very strict, and she basically just has to, for a short period of time, house sit for these mysterious people who she doesn't know who she's actually renting from. And then one of the other renters that she becomes familiar with suddenly disappears, and it kind of opens up this mystery of what is happening. And the apartment building itself is a character in this novel, I will say that. And there's a lot of like definitely creepy things that don't add up, that don't make sense. And Jules is just trying to figure out what is going on. And am I even going to survive this? Because strange and crazy and weird things are happening in that apartment building. This book I think is more of a slow burn. It gives off very gothic vibes, and there's all these conspiracies and everything that is happening. It's very isolating. It can be very claustrophobic feeling at times just because Jules is restricted to being in this room, in this building. The twist was kind of crazy. And as you're trying to figure out what is happening and then you realize what actually is happening, it's like, what? I feel like it kind of came out of left field, which is a good thing, right? Because you don't want to guess, the solution or the twist early on in the book. I thought this was coming out of complete left field. And it also makes you wonder, like, yes, because you do have to suspend your disbelief, but it kind of makes you wonder, like, are things like this really happening? Could they really happen? Because it seems like they could. So it's kind of frightening in that way too. But I do remember I really enjoyed this book. This is actually not, so Final Girls was not the first book that I had read from Riley Sager. This was not the second book, even though it was his book. The first book I read from him is actually coming a little up. Has it stuck with me like other books that I have read from him? No. But overall, I had a really good time reading it. And so that's why I'm ranking it midway, number 5. And next, I am ranking Riley's most recent novel at number 4, and that is The Unknown. This is a ghost story, sort of. In this book, you are following this film crew. The main actress in this film is the main character, and this film crew is filming on this island where apparently some very weird, ghosty, witchy things had happened 100 years prior. And the reason why they're on this island is because they are reenacting what happened on this island 100 years prior. And apparently there were women, I think there were 5 women that were on this island who vanished, and the only trace that they left were that their dresses were hung from a tree. This one was a wild ride for me. The first half to me felt like a very slow burn, sometimes to the point where I'm like, oh my God, is this going to be my first Riley Sager DNF? And it wouldn't have been a DNF because I didn't like the content, because I didn't like the subject matter. It would have been a DNF because I was just waiting and waiting and waiting for it to pick up. And it wasn't a slow burn because of like character development or anything. It just seemed it's hard to explain, but I just wanted something to happen. I didn't feel myself turning the page, like I do with normally with his books, just turning the page, wanting to figure out what happened, keeping me gripped like right from the beginning. I didn't feel that with this novel, but the reason why I'm ranking it at number 4 as opposed to being lower is because the second half was insane and it exploded in the best possible way. Once it hit like that halfway mark and things started unraveling, I was like, I need to figure out what's going on. Like, is it this? Is it that? And I found myself going back and forth about what it was actually happening and what it may be. And when I tell you I was wrong, I was very wrong, but in the best way. I was very happy to be wrong because I was very satisfied with, and I don't want to say the twist because it is multiple twists on twists on twists, which gives me like crazy whiplash. But I was very happy with the outcome. And there was one twist in particular, it kind of took me back to a book that I had read previously, which is also a movie that I absolutely loved. And I was completely floored by that twist. And so, because it was reminiscent of that, I was so excited. And I don't want to tell you the book or the movie because I feel like it's a spoiler if I do tell you that. But overall, I loved this book. And once it picked up, I was gone. I'm like, okay, I'm finishing this in one sitting. There is no way that anybody is going to get in my way. I will be finishing this book. And I did. But I highly recommend, highly, highly recommend this book if you like ghostly vibes, if you like witchy vibes, if you like a bit of historical fiction in there. This is up there. It's definitely up there. It's one of my favorites. Now we have number 3, which is the only book that I do not have a physical copy of. And it is also the first book I have ever read by Riley Sager, and that is The Last Time I Lied. In this book, you are following Emma, who is an art instructor, and she has recently returned to the summer camp where years ago her bunkmates had died. Why would you go back? But anyway, as Emma is at the summer camp, she decides that she wants to unravel the mystery of what actually happened to these girls. And I do believe, if I remember correctly, at some point she was looked at as a suspect. So there's also this guise of like wanting to clear her name. And of course, as what happens in a lot of these mystery thrillers that kind of go back to the past, the same thing starts happening to girls at the camp in present day. And so now Emma is like, okay, I really need to figure out what happened here. So this book reminds me a lot, and I did mention earlier about the Final Girls with the slasher films, but this book gives me serious Friday the 13th vibes, with Camp Crystal Lake and people disappearing, and you definitely get that sort of vibe. This book, I don't even remember how I came up on it, but I think it might have been recommended to me. Like I said, it was the very first Riley Sager book that I read, and I read it as an ebook, so that's why I don't have a physical copy. I just remember really, really enjoying the ride. And I remember when you got to the end, you thought that it was happening one way, but then you read a little further and it turns out it happened another way. And I just thought that the way that he did it was just so, I don't want to say unique, maybe it was unique. But it's been a long time since I've read this book. I do remember enjoying it so much, and I definitely I felt like I wanted to read more from this author. And that's kind of why I'm placing it at number 3, because this book kind of opened the floodgates for me when it came to Riley Sager, even though it wasn't his first book. I think this was his third, maybe, but it opened up the floodgates. And I have been a fan of his ever since. And yeah, there's just something about this book. It kind of holds like a special place in my heart. And I have been comparing a lot of his books to this book since then. And I have 2 so far that outrank this one. Yeah, I just found this book very mysterious, and it just gave off the right vibes that I needed to read at that time. And yeah, the twist kind of blew me away. Well, the last twist kind of blew me away because there's more than one, as his books tend to have. So, but that's all I'll say about that. On to the next. And at number 2, this book was my favorite Riley Sager book for a very long time until it was usurped by my number 1, and that is Home Before Dark. This, in my opinion, is prime Riley Sager. Like I said, this is one of my 2 very favorite books for him. And I will explain why this went down to number 2 when we get to my number 1 pick, which I'm sure by now you've already figured out if if you're a Riley Sager fan. But this book, oh, this was the second book that I read, and the reason why I read this from him is because I loved Last Time I Lied so much. And I think I read Last Time I Lied around the time that Home Before Dark was coming out. So I could read this book immediately afterwards. And I still think about this book and how creepy it was. Just the haunted house type vibes, the kind of claustrophobic, isolating type vibes. So, the premise of this book, you are following Maggie, who has inherited her home that years ago her family had fled in the middle of the night with no explanation. So think Amityville Horror, okay? And she inherits this home after her father has died, and she goes back to the house to kind of, pack things up. And, if I remember correctly, she was trying to sell it. Keep me honest here. I honestly don't remember, but I do know that she was going back after her father died because she had inherited. Well, her father had written a book so many years ago that explained why his family had left this house in the middle of the night with no explanation. And the book had mentioned ghosts and all of these like entities and, all the spooky stuff that was happening. Well, as Maggie dives in deeper, she realizes that the story wasn't exactly how she thought it was because she doesn't quite remember everything that happened. And so she's kind of realizing that the memories that she did have weren't exactly what, true, I guess you could say. But overall, this book was just chef's kiss. Very gothic, isolation, claustrophobic, haunted house kind of vibes. I absolutely loved the ending. I thought that he did an excellent job tying everything up, and the ending to me made sense. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's all I can really say, other than I loved this book. And up until my number one, this was my favorite Riley Sager book. But, you know, things change. So. And if you haven't figured out by now, my number one Riley Sager book, there's only one left. And that's number one. And that is the only one left. This book, holy crap. So I was in New Hampshire for a wedding and I took a trip to Target because we had some time before everything started. And I think we were actually like there the day before, whatever. So I picked up this book because it was a new release at that time. I think it might have come out like either that day or the day before, something like that. I was very, very excited to pick this up. So I picked up the book and went back to the hotel room and started reading it. And when I tell you, I could not put this down. Like I literally could not put this down from the first page. I was so enthralled and entranced with the story of this book. I can't explain it. And honestly, like I don't think I've felt that feeling for a book of this like the mystery thriller type book since then. In this book, you are following Kit, and she's been hired as a home health aide to this woman whose name is Lenora Hope, and she lives on this mansion on a cliff, like just as it's portrayed here on the book. And the thing is Lenora, she can't really communicate because she's mute. She's very elderly, she's not doing well, and Kit kind of goes to help her keep the house in order and be her aide. And Lenora all of a sudden starts trying to communicate through using a typewriter. And pretty early on, maybe even like in the first or second chapter, that Lenora is accused of murdering her entire family years before. But she's never been convicted. She has been convicted by the public. Basically, people think that she's guilty. Um, but it was never proven that she actually killed her family. So Kit is going into this situation wondering, am I with a murderer here? Like, did this woman actually commit these crimes? And once Lenora starts communicating through the using the typewriter, the question becomes more and more apparent of, did she actually do it? Is she a psychopath? Because Lenora does not come off as the psychopathic type. She comes off as just this very meek, quiet, sweet woman. And so Kit is trying to figure out, like, is this persona that people have given her true? And I will tell you, I have never been slapped so hard with a twist. And looking back on it, I'm like, I should have known. I should have known. Like, how did I not know? I have read so many mystery thrillers over the years. The majority of the books that I read are mystery thrillers. So it's very rare that I can't spot a twist coming. But this one, I was like, what? Excuse me? Okay, this is what we're doing. When I said this book gripped me, like it literally gripped me for dear life and did not let go. Every minute that I could find to read this book in between like getting ready and attending a wedding over a weekend, I did. And I pretty sure I stayed up late to finish this book just because I had to know. I had to know. And it did not disappoint one bit. I loved every single minute of this book, and I will go so far as to say this is one of my absolute all time favorite mystery thriller books ever written. In my opinion, this might be equal to or even better than Gone Girl. Do not come for me. Riley, if you can put out more books like this, like, oof, yeah, absolutely. So that's all I have to say. I'm not going to say anymore. I feel like I'm rambling at this point. I probably could ramble all day because Riley Sager is one of my all-time favorite authors. Like I said, he's automatic buy for me. There's only a handful of authors that I will buy their book no matter what. Won't even read the reviews. I just nope, I'm going to read it and decide for myself. And Riley Sager is one of those people. And some of his books, yes, in my opinion, aren't as good as others. Like I said, like with A Vengeance, I still think it was nicely written and it kept me wanting to learn more. But like I said, at that the whole like and then there were none type thing is just way overdone for me. But I still liked it. Middle of the Night. It was more introspective and emotional and a little bit less of a mystery than his other books, but I still really enjoyed it. I tend if to find like if I really, really like the authors and their style of writing, I will find things in their book to really enjoy. And as long as I had a really good time reading it, I don't always read into the plot. And sometimes, like, maybe the characters do really stupid things. If the ending ends up being amazing and I walk away from that book feeling like I had a really good time and I enjoyed it and and I can't wait to read the next one, then for me, that's all I need, right? And I think, with the exception of maybe one or two of these books, I think maybe with A Vengeance and Middle of the Night, I did rate them 4 stars compared to all of the others that I've rated 5 stars. But that's still a really good book for me. 4 stars is nothing to shake a leg at, especially when I read so many mystery thrillers, like so many of them, and they tend to like bleed into one another and they tend to blend with others, and sometimes I can't differentiate. Like earlier, I can't differentiate between, was it Riley Sager, was it Grady Hendrix, was it somebody else? Like I can't quite remember. But all in all, if I read a book and I have a really good time doing it, it's going to get a high rating for me. And Riley Sager does that for me. I cannot wait for his next book. I'm just so happy that I have a catalog of books from an author that I is almost like a guarantee for me that I'm going to love and I'm going to have a good time with. That's really all I have to say about that. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed your time with me today and leave some comments. If you agree with me, don't agree with me, I would love to hear your opinions about any or all of the books that I talked about today. And a good part of having this YouTube channel is the community and the engagement and talking about and learning like differing opinions from yours. And it's just kind of great. So thank you again so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And until next time.